Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another class. Today, we're going to be talking about, we're doing the Principles of Planetary Magic class. Today, we're going to be talking about the sphere of Mercury, the wonderful planet of Mercury and the wonderful god Hermes. Um, as a Hermetic magician, this is a very important sphere, in my opinion, for us to be studying and learning about. And I try to, I really try to, I, I try to take this, like, I tried to do a lot of clarification on our energies here today as I was putting this together, because I personally get lost in Hermes pretty easily. As a Hermetic magician, I'm just very much like, I take it for granted, is what it boils down to. I tend to be very, um, I don't know, so immersed in it that I lose sight of what it is that makes it Hermetic. But the planet Hermes, and as a Hermetic magician, is just, it's everywhere in everything that we do. It's part of our, in whom we live and breathe and have our being. I mean, I talk a lot about Zeus and how Zeus is my go-to god for the the experience of the one thing and the all thing, and um, as the deity of choice. But in a lot of ways, I've also done that with Hermes, and the regular invocations of Hermes, and the regular work with the god and the planet of Mercury. Uh, I hit this point when I was doing all this stuff with him, where I wrote this hymn that's based on his many epithets, or at least the ones that are most important to me. And I'm including that in part of the class here, for the epithets section, because it's pretty much the most effective pieces of that particular god form that rose to the surfaces as I was working with it. But yeah, so anyway, it's a huge subject, and like I was saying, we get very immersed in it, and it's hard to it's easy to lose track of what it is that we're working with, because it's all up in our face the whole time. So I'm going to try to be comprehensive and cover all the aspects of it that are most important to us as working magicians, as when we're trying to work with the spirits of Mercury and the powers that it represents, as we're applying those to our lives and using it to transform ourselves. But it's just such a huge subject that we could go on about this for hours and hours and hours, and it would be very easy to miss the point. So I'm going to try to focus on just the pieces that are most important to us, as sort of like the core aspects of the planet, and how we can use it to be more effective in our magic as we go forward. So yeah, so last week we talked about Venus. We talked about we've gone now through in the chain of manifestation, when an idea comes into being in the mind of God. We've walked it through the spheres of Saturn and Jupiter and Mars and the Sun and Venus. Now we have gone through and we have fleshed out this idea to the point where all that's left after Mercury is the moon, which is the final wrapper that goes on to things. So at this point, an idea in the process of manifesting, it's gone through, it's gotten its foundational stuff, its framework is built out. A lot of the blessings and the joy and the juiciness of life have been added to that and expanded upon it. The martial forces have constrained that initial expansion and focused those energies into materializing the essence of the idea that is going to be manifesting as this comes into being. The solar aspects have been integrated and applied, and it's starting to magnify and project itself out into the universe. It's got everything it needs to really reach out to other people and expose the world to the truth that it represents about whatever it is in the mind of God that needs to manifest. In the realm of Venus, all of the social aspects and how it's going to integrate with the whether or not it's going to be liked or not liked, or how it's going to be attracting people to its vibe, and how it's going to be repelling the things that are not attractive to it, that do not help support it. All those things were determined in Venus, and we've moved over to Mercury, and we've got all these qualities now have been gathered into this thing, and it's time to start putting it together into structure and order, and getting it all integrated and relative to itself, so that these forces can now begin to mix and mingle and swish together and swirl together until they can be expressed to the moon so that it can take on its final form and then be turned over to the material elemental kings so that they can wrap it up in a physical wrapper, and we can actually begin to experience this idea here as manifestations of consciousness. So like Rufus, Josh, whatever, can experience this, and Jennifer can experience it, and Joey can experience it, and we can all experience it from our own perspectives after it's got this body, but it's going to have all of the planetary energies that it's been condensing around itself as it descended through the spheres. All those things have to be integrated, mingled, mixed in the proper proportions. They have to be wired together, as it were. Like if you're familiar with building a computer, you take a motherboard and then you plug in all the components to it, and then you make sure that they're all connected, and then you turn on the power and you make sure that they're all talking to each other properly. And once they're talking to each other properly, then you can start installing the software that'll make it run, and it'll start to be effective. And then once it's all installed and configured properly, then you give it to the user, and then the user can start to use it, right? And that's sort of like what we're doing is we're in the process of we've got all the stuff put together on the machine, and we got to make sure it's technically tied together and that it's communicating with itself in the proper ways. All right. So like again, going back to the computer as an example, you've got your inputs, your ports, you've got like where you plug your mouse in and your computer monitor and all that stuff. You've got all these things that are there that are physically there, that are materially there, but they haven't been wired together. And it's in Mercury where we start to wire all these pieces together and create an actual cohesive system that's internally communicating with itself. So the forces of Mars are expressing themselves accurately through the forces of the sun, and the forces of Jupiter are being integrated with the forces of Mars in ways that are actually going to be effective at expressing the core essence of this idea into the material world. Right. So this is the realm of the system of information, where the system starts to flow and communicate with itself and communicate with the environment around it. When we get a sensory unit, so like if this idea that was going to manifest as a person, right, me, right, I'm coming into being. Once I get to the Mercury section, it's where I start to stitch together all the pieces of my personality and the pieces of my thoughts and my core essence of my will to exist and what I want to materialize while I'm in the flesh here. I start to stitch all that together and start to put it together in a way that I can express it. So like the solar powers are very good at projecting the essence of who you are into this world, and that's like your sun sign, right? But where your Mercury ends up on your chart, that's how you process thoughts. That's how you process the inputs that you receive through your sensory, your eyeballs and your nose balls and your mouth balls and your ear balls. All your sensory inputs come into you through your flesh, and then it goes into your mind, and your mind sorts all that out and plugs it into the core essence of who you are. And it's that integration between the core essence of who you are with this interaction with the manifest material experience. Once all that stuff comes together, it's that communication of information and experience and self and awareness and response to that experience, that communication, that flow back and forth between the unmanifest eyeball that is observing all things through our incarnation and the manifest experiences that we're passively receiving and actively generating, right? So it's like there's a push-pull going on between the internal and the external, and then there's a processor too, right? That's making sure that what's on the inside is receiving what's actually going on, and what's on the inside is getting expressed properly. And that governor in between the internal world and the external world, that intelligence that sorts things out and compartmentalizes experiences and sorts them so that we don't get overwhelmed, and so that we don't mix up our solar aspects with our Venus aspects, for example, or something like that. If we don't I'm having a hard time communicating, of course, because we're talking about the importance of Mercury and how it's the way that we communicate with ourselves and express that clear idea of what we represent. So the best way I think that we can understand Mercury is that it's a flowing system. It's a system of information. data. One of the big things I try to get across to my coworkers in my day job is that what we build are data-driven business solutions, right? Everything that we do is about taking a process that has information that comes in. We do a task with that information, and then we report. We send an output up the food chain to explain that we did our tasks. So information comes in, we respond to it, and information goes out. And there's a process, right? There's people involved, there's users, there's you and me, anytime we do anything, whether it's getting a cup of coffee, we're interacting with a bunch of physical things. We're interacting with people. We're interacting with processes that develop the coffee and develop the water and develop the pot and put it all together in a place where we could buy it. All the income stuff that came together, that coordination of all these forces that go into just making a cup of coffee experience for us in this material world. All of those different pieces of information have to be received, processed, and reported on. And that receiving, processing, and reporting piece of our soul and our spiritual interface with this material world is represented by Mercury, right? So that's what Mercury does. So I tried to find a lot of complicated looking pictures for this, but it's not it wasn't always the best pictures, but I think we did pretty good with what we ended up with. So that's basically what's going on with the process of manifestation and the sphere of Mercury and what it does. It's about information. It's about communication. It's about the flow of data between the unmanifest and the manifest world. The occult properties of trying to take that nebulous definition and explanation that I just put together into words and turn that into something that we can use as magicians. It's kind of complicated, right? Because it's like understanding that that's what it's doing in the background was something that like took me the longest to really internalize and understand what was going on with Mercury, because it's a very passive system. It's running all the time. It's already been configured. It's always on, and it's always functioning, and when your communication system gets distorted, you're not going to have a clear understanding of what's going on around you. If people have been through trauma and they go through an experience and that trauma makes them unable to process their experience accurately because of what they've been through previously, that's a Mercury issue, right? There's a communication breakdown there. The filter or the lens that we use to process our events and our experience is cracked, or it's dirty, or something's happening so that we're not getting the information clearly on our unmanifest side to respond to it and create what we want and express that true will or that true solar principle or essence that we want to materialize. We're not gonna be able to express that if we have something dirty on our lens, if we're not clean with our mercurial thing. So that's where that process of initiation comes in. And as you go through this initiation process, it cleans out that inability or that the mess in between your inner self and that materialized world around you. And it makes it easier for you to manifest and materialize what you're looking for, but also to understand what you need to do to get that harmony that we talked a little bit about in the sphere of Venus to manifest the things that you're interested in. The way that we look at the mesh, that framework of information and data processing that Mercury represents in the occult traditions is we say that it's the mind or the element of air, right? The quality of air and the intellectual properties that manage all the sorting and the classification. It's also the sphere of your wit, your intellect, your ability to respond to things around you in a quick-witted way, in a way that lets you process that information and get to a point that is beneficial to you, that's what wit is. Wittiness is the ability to respond quickly to a situation, to make it work to your advantage, and to make you look better, and to make it easier for you to crisply and cleanly interact with your situation in a way that's humorous, usually, that's intelligent, and yeah, uh, it's all about that spark of the intellect that is interacting directly with the stuff that's going on in this elemental world. So when we talk about the mercurial forces and using them in our magic, it's it's about speed is very much a part of what we're looking at. We'll talk a little bit about the Flash. He shows up. I don't know if I actually have the picture in the presentation, but he shows up in the workbook. But like if you're familiar with, I think it was Marvel Comics, or one of the comic book brands has the Flash as a main character. You can tell I'm not a big comic book person, but the Flash was modeled on Hermes. He's got the winged helmet, and he's got the winged feet, and he moves really quickly. And the way that the Flash can move at the speed of what they call the speed force is like what runs the universe and keeps time on track. It's very much reminiscent of what the sphere of Mercury is all about. It's very speedy. It's very energetic. It's very flowing. It never turns off, right? So the thing about like the flow of electricity that is the manifestation of a human being, our mitochondria has electricity in our cells, and it's shooting off all this stuff, and it's running up and down our nervous system and into our brains, where we process all this electricity. That electricity is always flowing as long as we're alive, and that's like how we know we're alive, is the electricity is on, and it's a current, and that current is running, and that flow is what Mercury is all about, that ongoing process, and it never turns off. If you ever if you get deep into meditation kind of stuff, and really get into knowing yourself and knowing your mind and how your brain works, and you've done meditation for a couple of years, or at least a few months, and you've started to really pay attention to what your brain does as your consciousness shifts between different states. For example, if you do meditation in the morning when you just woken up, and you're likely to fall back to sleep, you can watch what happens with your consciousness as you're moving in and out of that just woke up state and into the fugue state, and sort of like coming to terms with your awareness. And when you've been meditating for a while, you get this sense of I want to say, it's just observational awareness, right? You're aware of what's going on with you, even if as your consciousness switches back and forth to what some people like in your normal day-to-day life, you function at a level of awareness that it makes it easy to lose track of things when you fall asleep, right? But when you've been meditating for a while, you remember more of your dreams, you remember more of what's going on as you shift from one state to another, and you're just more able to interact with it and observe it and retain that later on when you're thinking about it. The shifting of awareness, as you do this meditation, you start to realize when you're starting to fall asleep, you can hear your brain relax. And like, if you're aware of how your brain works when you're conscious, you can feel your thoughts and your thinking, and you can see the part of you that's responding to existence around you. But there's a little voice inside of us that is constantly commenting on everything that's happening. And it's basically just saying, what's happening, what you're experiencing moment by moment. It's telling you what you think about it. And it's not necessarily telling you the truth. It's just telling you a response, whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing. I think we talked about that last week a little bit, how there's not really a morality to that biological observer part of ourselves, and that we have to apply that from our other unmanifest selves. But that constant flow, that little voice that's always talking and processing our moment to moment experiences, that little voice is the voice of Hermes. It's the voice of Mercury in our minds. It's the voice of our wit. It's the voice of our awareness. And as you develop your mercurial initiations and your integration of the forces of the sphere, you're going to find yourself more able to control what that observer is saying and how that processor is processing your moment to moment experiences. And you begin to understand that you're never asleep. You never stop. That part of you that is mercurial, that part of you that you received from the sphere of Mercury as you were materializing, it's always on and it's always processing things. And the part of you that dreams is mercurial. One of his children were the messengers of dream. His children are the messengers of oracles, he's the source of the birds of divination when they did bird divinations. The air is the source of all of these spirits in between the earth and the heavens. It's the source of all of that stuff, is that aerial nature, that intellectual nature. And anyway, that's sort of what we're going to be working on when we work on integrating the forces of the spheres, is sort of learning how to hear that part of ourselves that is constantly on and constantly telling the universe what to do, because we're basically expressing all the time to everybody around us through our attitude and our emotions, our eyeballs, our words, our deeds, our moods, our pheromones. We are always expressing something, and that expression is coming from that mercurial trait, that mercurial quality of our essence. And the more control we have over that, the more effective we're going to be at manifesting and materializing the things that we want. I want to talk a little bit about why we call it Hermetic magic, and it goes entirely back to Hermes Trismegistus and the Corpus Hermeticum. The Corpus Hermeticum is a collection of works from the 3rd century. The second book of the Corpus Hermeticum is called the Divine Pymander. And in the Divine Pymander, it discusses how the Hermes Trismegistus goes up on a mountaintop and he gets taken out of his body and he receives this vision from the Pymander, the shepherd of men, right? And if you're familiar with the New Testament, one of the names of the Logos, Jesus Christ was the shepherd of men, right? And then the word that they used for the shepherd of men was Pymander. So the Hermetic authors who were writing this were writing it about the Pymander, and they're speaking about the Logos, and they're basically talking about the same entity that the Gnostics referred to as Christ and that the Christians referred to as Christ, but it was a totally different perspective on what that Logos was all about. That myth of that the Logos revealed to Hermes Trismegistus in the Divine Pymander within the Corpus Hermeticum tells us that we are going to be that we are made in the image of this creator God that takes an idea and manifests it by speaking it into being. You know, the Logos is the word. It's the vocalization of existence is how this creator God manifested existence. You know, it's in Genesis when God is said to say, "Let there be light." Luke's fiat. It's a fiat driven universe. Creation is created through words, and the expression of the symbols that represent the ideas is what creates the catalysis, the catalysm, the catalysis of the universe. The thing that kicks off the actual condensation of our existence and our experiences is this verbalization of a symbol. That's the principles of hermetics that are being expressed in the Divine Pymander. So when we say that we're Hermetic magicians, we're saying we believe that we express this invisible, unmanifest idea that we have, this desire that we want to see manifest around us. We express it through our words symbolically in a ritual where we've conjured up these intelligences and these powers. We tell them what to do. We take these forces and we give it form through our words, through our statement of intent. We're telling them what to do. And it's the vibrations and it's the oration, it's the wind passing our vocal cords that allow us to make this unmanifest thing into a materialized process that has physical things that you can measure. You can record my voice. My voice is being recorded right now. My invisible thoughts are being made to materialize right now. And you're hearing them, I'm hearing them, I'm recording them. People hear them for years now, right? These are all aspects of that hermetic process of changing reality through our words. And the rulership of Hermes and Mercury over eloquence is how is why we are hermetic magicians. He's the ruler of our eloquence, because the bigger the vocabulary we have, the better we are at expressing ourselves in our words and our language, the better of a magician we're going to end up being. So that's why we are hermetic magicians, and that's why this is so important, is to understand the whole process of what we do in ceremonial magic, especially, and this whole planetary magic process is within that framework of ceremonial conjure magic. What we're doing is entirely a Hodian experience. If you're familiar with the Tree of Life, it's got the 10 spheres that come down from Kether and back and forth across the middle pillar. And it's the pillar of severity, and then the pillar of mercy, and then the middle pillar, and then the pillar of severity, and then pillar of mercy, and then the middle pillar, all the way down, right? And so when we get to here, we've gone from Venus over, where it's love and light and everything, over to Mercury, where it's all like intellect and mind, right? And this sphere of Hermes, the sphere of hermetic magic, is the sphere of Hod on the Tree of Life, and that's all about intellectualism. And if you look at ceremonial magicians, we all have these tables of correspondences. And if you look at our class here, like in the workbook, the appendix is always this big table of correspondences. Excuse me. But that's our list of columns and rows that take everything that we know and how it's related to what we're trying to express. It's our database that we use to refer to grab our symbol sets, to develop our will, to put together our signal that we're going to broadcast, to hack into the pirate matrix and change our reality, right? That's what we're doing. And so in a lot of ways, when you look at the Tree of Life, ceremonial magicians and their spiritual processes, they tend to pile everything over onto one side of the sphere, and the sphere of Hod, and we get very mercurial. People who are very intellectual and have this love of taking things apart and classifying things. The fact that we're drawn to magic is because we want to understand how this stuff works, and we want to use it better, and we want to express ourselves better. That's why we get involved with this stuff. We're drawn to it because we are attuned. We have an affinity with Mercury, with that sphere of the air, where we want to understand what the pieces are and how they fit together, and how we can manipulate the flow of information from the unmanifest to the manifest in a better way, so that we're able to more thoroughly experience and express our experiences to other people, and to fully appreciate the experiences other people are bringing to us. We're drawn to that. So we're going to be very mercurial with everything we do. We're going to be out of balance because that's where we start from. We're going to be overly intellectual. We'll overanalyze. We'll have a tendency, and these are all tendencies that a lot of us have. And this is all just like guidelines and caveats, red flags that we should be aware of as hermetic magicians, in my opinion. That these are the negative traits of Hermes that we're going to run into as we start to go through the initiation process and integrate our forces and really get better at communicating our will into the material world. It's going to bring up all these miscommunication things that we have built up in ourselves. So that's why I wanted to sort of bring that up a little bit. All right, so that's sort of the introduction there. Let's go ahead and get started here on the actual class. So Hermes is the messenger of the god, and this quote is from, I think it's from the Hesiod, and it's talking about what Hermes is going to do. And it's talking about how Hermes fastened on his ankle wings and grasped in his fist the wand that charms to sleep, put on his magic cap, and thus arrayed, Jove's son sprang from his father's citadel down to the earth. Hermes is the god of who is the messenger of Zeus, right? So Zeus has something that he wants to express to either another god or a human being or to materialize on the planet. Hermes delivers the message. He's the messenger. He delivers whatever the message is to the material world. So, like as I was saying earlier, the bridge between the unmanifest and the manifest, he's the one that takes the will of Zeus and brings it to down from Olympus into the material world, into the different lands, and distributes it to all the people. In the myths where we see Hermes wandering around with Zeus and Poseidon, for example, they go around and they travel, and people either give them hospitality or they don't. And Aesop has all these fables that he wrote about what happens when you give Zeus and Hermes and Poseidon great comforts. They give you blessings, and if you if you don't show hospitality to the gods, they punish you, and all this stuff. All these moralizing tales from Aesop. Aesop's fables were a gift from Hermes, by the way. That's why we have Aesop's fables, is because Aesop went to the temple of Hermes and made offerings on his altar, and wanted to receive a portion of wisdom. And some people received eloquence, and some people received sophistry, the ability to sophisticatedly express ideas. And some people were filled with wisdom and all this stuff, and poetry. And when it all came down to it, Hermes was exhausted. He'd given out all of his gifts of wisdom. And then he remembered that this shepherd Aesop had left this honeycomb and some flowers and this stuff, and had skedaddled because he had to get back to his crops, and he's like, oh, I mean his sheep, and he's like, okay, what am I going to do? So then he thought back to his youth, and how when he was a child, he learned everything that he learned was through these rustic stories of simple truths. And he remembered the fable, and he found the fable in his temple of wisdom, and he granted that to Aesop. So Aesop has all these stories about Hermes that he provides that give you insights into Hermes and what Hermes does. But Aesop is a little bit bitter. So like everything that he talks about with Hermes has this little like a little sting to it, and it's just a little bit negative. But it's funny. You can see that Aesop was very well aware that Hermes didn't quite remember him when he was passing things out, and he points out all the little flaws that Hermes has, and Hermes is the god of craftsmen. And so like Aesop explains that one day what Zeus had Hermes deliver was all of the deceitfulness and the selfishness and the corruption that craftsmen have. So like when a craftsman tries to tell you that their materials are the highest quality that came all the way from ancient Egypt to be made in this way, and blah, blah, blah. But really, they're just buying their stuff from down the street. That deceitfulness to gain things is a mercurial trait. And that's what Mercury delivers, right? And Aesop is sure to make sure that everybody knows that Hermes is this liar and a deceiver, and he one of the things that he brings is clear communications, but also he's the god of the opposite of that. Just like Ares was the god of peace as well as the god of war, Hermes is the god of mixed communications and miscommunications and misunderstandings that are beneficial to one person over and detrimental to the other. He rules over a lot of the exchange of money and value. He's very much about determining the value of things. But yeah, so there's one story where in his role as messenger, Zeus sends Hermes to the earth to distribute lies, falsehood, and conniving deceits, right? And so he's going around in this wagon full of all this terrible deceitfulness, and he's doling out a little bit to all these different countries that he's going to. And he's put a little bit in Attic, and he put a little bit in Athens, and a little bit in Sparta, and he gets over into Arabia, and his cart breaks down, and so all these Arabs come out and they steal everything that was on his cart. So like everybody has a little bit of evil in them, but when it comes to Arab traders, they're the worst, according to Aesop. And he's just blatantly putting all of his racism right there into this fucking fable. And it's not like we are the first generation of people to be racist against the Middle East and think that all Arabs or all whatevers are terrible people. Aesop and the Greeks were teaching it from the very beginning, and they blamed Hermes for that because, well, they blamed the Arabs for robbing Hermes of all of his gifts, and it turns out that his gifts were all evil. Yeah, so he's the Angelos. One of his epithets is Angelos. He's the angel messenger of the unmanifest to the manifest, of between us and Jove, Jupiter, Jehovah, the source of all, the head of our experiences, where we get all of our information from. He's also the god of the underworld, the guide of the dead. He is the Hermes Chthonios is another aspect of him. So if you go through the Orphic hymns to Hermes, the first Orphic hymn to Hermes is all about his celestial aspect and the messenger child of Maya and Zeus and blah blah blah, Lord of the Games, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's Hermes Chthonios, and it's a totally different hymn, and some people say it's a different god, but it's not. Hermes is Hermes, and Hermes Chthonios is his underworld aspect. And what happened was, so when Persephone went down to hell to live with Hades, and everybody found out what was going on, and they agreed that she would come back. It's Mercury, it was Hermes, who got sent as the messenger to go and get Persephone and walk her back. And so Hermes and Hecate walk Persephone back to Olympus every year, and then take her back to hell and Hades in the wintertime. So they're basically, her guards and her guides and her friends and her companions. And when that happened, he became the god of the messenger, that was the messenger god that carried the souls of the dead to Hades, right? So to really understand that, we have to look at like even earlier what he was, but we'll get into that a little bit more. But he's also the teacher of ecstatic mysteries, right? One of the things that I think it's in the Orphic hymn. It's this thing that says that basically the only person that can teach you the mysteries of ecstasy are Hermes, right? And Hermes and Mercury and the child of Maya is the only place that you can learn the ecstatic mysteries, which are basically mushroom enlightenment, ayahuasca enlightenment, DMT enlightenment, alcoholic inebriation awareness, where all of a sudden you become one with the all thing. These drug-induced ecstasies that put you in touch with the full-on experience of the divine, that leaves you like shaken and not stirred. Those aspects of existence are only as accessible through this mercurial interface. And basically what those drugs do is they get down into the aspect of yourself that is processing your moment to moment experience in the brain, and it tweaks your perceptions, your ability to interact with the rest of the world, because you're hallucinating, or your endorphins are turned all the way up, so you're emotionally processing everything that you would normally process intellectually, like on MDMA, right? You're physically feeling your emotions, instead of, you get this synesthesia going on with these different drugs that interfere with how you experience things, and it mingles things and it mixes things and it changes how you are going to process and receive these things. That's Hermes. So these drugs are actually interfering with or enhancing or mixing up a little bit, exaggerating your process of experiencing the moment and expressing your unmanifest will into this material world. So Hermes is also the teacher of the ecstatic mysteries. It's only in these ecstatic mysteries where we can have our one-on-one conscious integration with that cosmic deity, that cosmic consciousness that manifests with all of us individuated. But it's still a part of us, right? And we can find that in the drugs and in deep meditation. So it's not just drugs. You can induce these ecstasies. I was talking to my wife about it earlier today, just with pranayama. She was telling me about how when she first started learning pranayama, she had a full-on almost like a drug-induced experience because of her breathing. It's just a matter of oxygen and blood chemistry and brain chemistry, and you can really drive that with just thinking about things and controlling your body. Your experience in the world is made up of your mind, your body, your emotions, and your spirit, right? Your driving force. Those are the things that have to be in harmony for you to have a life, or they don't even have to be in harmony, but those are the things that come together for you to have an experience in the world. You have a body that you have senses in, that you can speak through and receive messages from others. You have emotions that that drive your passions and your processes. You have the spirit that has desires and wants, and you have uh, this mind that's just like processing everything and thinking about things, and is running interference and is your interface to everything else, right? So when you work with your body and your emotions with pranayama, you're breathing deeply, you're using your mind to focus your energies of your body, you're overwhelming your body and making it produce too much energy, so it creates certain results and chemical processes in your brain that get kicked off, and you control those through your willpower and your mind. You actually change what your brain does with those chemicals when they release, because your mind is focused on things. Your heart is having these emotional responses to this physical chemical release that you're pumping out, and your spirit is driving it to focus it into this connectivity with this all thing, and you end up having this experience of the divine. And they've measured what's going on in your brain when like Carmelite nuns or Buddhist monks are meditating or praying. They did this test, either Newsweek or Time or some college. They plugged all these spiritual people into these EKG machines and measured what their brains are doing. And no matter what you believe, if you're a Carmelite nun praying Jesus or a Buddhist monk meditating and saying mantra, your brain does the same thing. Your amygdala shuts down when they have this one-on-one connection with the all thing and this spiritual mystical experience. Their amygdala is off. It's just basically, it has finally shut off, and that piece of itself, the piece of ourselves that is always ready for that is responsible for individuation, that separates my sense of my butt touching my chair right now from the chair itself, knowing that there's an edge that is my skin. That awareness is all rooted in the amygdala, and these meditative processes shut that down, and these prayerful processes shut that down. And that's what you're trying to do with the breathing and the mental structures and all that stuff. But you can also get that through drugs, and the problem with drugs is that you don't have that mental focus and control, and that emotional drive is just sort of like on and on and on, and your spirit isn't necessarily as integrated into the process as you want it to be, because it's all just being driven by this desire to have a good time, and no intent and no awareness. It's just kind of just, bleh, here I am, and let me experience this lovely experience with the all thing. But it's not directed in the same way that like a willful, intended magical or mystical or meditative experience would be. So anyway, the ecstatic mysteries are also the realm of Hermes, because he's that interface. He's that part that lets us connect that eternal divine with our temporary mortal aspect. All right, so if you look at when Hermes began to be introduced into Greek mythology, so there's, if you look historically at the archaeological record, the first temple to Hermes that they found, the oldest one that they have, is in Attic in Greece, right? And in Attic Greece, he was the god. It was not like he was a member of Olympus and there were different factions where they worshiped. Some people worshiped Zeus for some things and Hermes for something else, and Athena for something else. It wasn't like that. They had the city god, there was the big god, and he did everything. And Hermes in Attic was God. It was just God. There was no Zeus or anything else. And as they interacted with other cultures and other gods came into play, we developed this whole Olympus mythology that has all these gods and titans and all this stuff. But it was organic over thousands of years, right? And they can track when Hermes was introduced into the swirl and where he came from just by the iconography that they find with Hermes. And he shows up dressed in a wide brimmed hat. He's got bright orange hair. When they've analyzed his the colors of his statues, they find out that he always had red hair. So that's why the color of Hermes is orange, by the way, is because he was a redhead. He's a ginger. So that's why, if you wonder why I had the big redhead on our cover of today's class, it's because he's the original ginger. But the wide brimmed hat is from Persia. It's representative of the culture that he came from, and people think that he came from the Orient, and they can track when he came from the Orient, probably around 800 BC, maybe 1200 BC, maybe 1500 BC. I'm not sure. I don't really remember, to be honest. But somewhere back there, all of a sudden, these people started mingling, and Hermes got integrated. Hermes is one of the gods that has the epithet Agator. So it's Hermes Agator, Zeus Agator, Poseidon Agator, I think. And there's only a very few gods that have this epithet Agator, and it means the leader. And it basically means that at one point they were considered the chief god. And when you look at Hermes, he also is depicted with this giant phallus. Like if you look at the Herms, in ancient Greece, I can't remember what they called them, but the original Greeks, when Socrates was talking about the people who were there before the Persians and the Ionians at the Ionic Peninsula, whatever, before all that stuff formed, the original people that lived there, they were just phallic worshipers. They worshiped this this idea of this holy phallus, and the Sacrothatians, I think it's called, they received this when they came to Greece. They received this awareness and this teaching, this mystery from that tradition, and they passed it on through this cult of, I want to say, the Kyberos, and they were the twin dwarf children of Hephaestus, and they were given the phallus of Zagreus, according to their mystery tradition, to guard, and and guarding this phallus was the secret of the mystery that explains why Hermes was always depicted with a giant phallus in the old days. And when you look at the Herms are these square pillars that have the head of Hermes on it. Here's some. So I have a miniature one here. This is a Herm. It's just a square. They're like 4 or 5 feet tall, or 3 feet tall, or something like that. They're just like pillars on the side of the road in Greece, and they've got the head of Zeus, and they've got a little phallus on it. Right? Oh, you can't see it. There it is. So they've got a little phallus on the thing, and the phallus represents that Agator, that he was the leader, that he was the primal source of manifestation and materialization, right? Hermes Chthonios is related to the Agathos daemon. The Agathos daemon was just a black snake that would go underground and return back above ground. And because it went down underground and back above ground, it was considered hermetic, because Hermes was that flow down to the underworld and back up. So the black snake of Agathos daemon was related to Hermes Chthonios in some myths. And this is all stuff I read in Themis. It's a really great book if you ever get a chance to dive into that whole thing. Anyway, so when he got introduced to Greek culture, he was presented as the son of Zeus and Maya, a nymph. And as soon as he shows up, like the very first thing when he comes into the gods and the mythology, his original myth of being introduced to the other gods is he steals Apollo's cows. So like Maya and Zeus have Hermes, and then Hermes grows up somewhere, we don't know where, but then he comes out as an adult, or a young adult, a youth, and he sees these cows of Apollo, and he thinks they're awesome, and he decides he's going to take them. So he takes these cows and hides them, and Apollo's looking all over for his stuff, and nobody knows where it is. Nobody even knows about Hermes. Maya, Zeus didn't know about. I guess Zeus wasn't aware of it, and Maya wasn't really paying attention, and nobody knew that Hermes had stolen these cows. And meanwhile, so he's like God, he's the shepherd, right? So this is where the idea of him as the shepherd comes from. um but while he's out there being a shepherd, he invents the lyre to play to the cows, because I mean he's a bored shepherd, and Apollo loves the lyre, and so Hermes gives him the lyre, and Apollo forgives him for stealing his cows, and he gets accepted into the Olympic courts, and Zeus makes him his messenger, and he becomes the messenger of the gods. But he remains historically, like before he became a god of Olympus, he was a rustic god. He was a god of the shepherds. He started off as this Epilemius, I think it is. It's the sheep herding shepherd is one of his epithets, and he's the god of animal husbandry. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But this was his original manifestation in Greece. Was he was the shepherd god, and he was a little bit feisty, a little spicy. He was deceitful and cunning and tricky. He's a trickster deity. He's a trickster god. He's quick-witted, and he's always trying to get what he wants in a clever way at the detriment of others. He's very much about gain and using information for personal gain and personal enjoyment. And he has a sense of humor where he's amused by Apollo being annoyed that he stole his cows, for example. That's just sort of his attitude. And from the very beginning, his trickster aspect was integrated and woven into his mythology. So when we look at him as he progresses and builds out his role as a god, and we see all the different things that he becomes as a god, you'll see that he continues to be a shepherd in a sense in all of his roles. He's always guiding people towards things. He's guiding animals towards where they should go to eat and drink and sleep. And in the same way, he guides the dead souls. Hermes Chthonios is guiding the dead souls. He's the shepherd of souls that takes them down to the underworld. Yeah. So in the wars, Hermes was actually a warrior god. We don't think about him that way because he's Hermes, right? He's very intellectual and smart people we don't think of as being very warrior-like. But one of the things about the gods is that they had to fight in wars, and he was always being sneaky. He was always outwitting his opponents. He had a helmet of invisibility. He had you know what? I wanted to go back real quick. So yeah, so these weapons that he has and his accoutrements. The ankle wings are made by Hephaestus, and they let him fly through the air, right? So he's always up by the clouds when he's delivering these messages. He's sort of the lord of the aerial spirits in a way because of these ankles, wings, these things that Hephaestus made him that let him fly. He's got this helmet of invisibility, so he can fly and he can disappear. Right. So if you think about that, there's like a challenge that goes around the internet every once in a while. Would you rather fly or would you rather be invisible? And if you want to fly, it means that you're an extrovert who wants to be everything. And if you want to be invisible, it means you're an introvert and you're sneaky and you're all this stuff. It's a bunch of pop psychological crap. But Hermes could do both. He could both fly and be invisible when he wanted to. And that rod that he has that lets people go to sleep, when he became a god of the underworld and started shepherding these souls back and forth to hell, the undeads, the restless undead, when he used this as a wand, that caduceus, to put the souls to sleep or to raise them up and wake them up. So like if a spirit is somewhere it shouldn't be, he uses his wand to wake them up and get them moving. He shepherds them to hell, and then he uses the wand to put them to sleep where they should be. So that's what the wand does. That's what the helmet does, and that's what his wings do. So like he can fly, he can be invisible, and he can make people fall asleep whenever he wants to. So all of his powers in the war are very sneaky. He's a spy. He goes in behind the scenes when the gigantes in the gigantomachy, when the giants have besieged Mount Olympus, Ares goes down and fights them and gets captured, and it's Hermes that goes out, sneaks out and frees him using his invisible helmet and his swift feet, and he puts the guards to sleep with his wand. And that's basically what he does. He's the spy. He's the spy in their little gang. And he saves Zeus at another time. He goes out when Typhon has been released against the gods and has chased all the gods down to Egypt. Zeus stays and fights Typhon. And I hate this story. It didn't exist before 2nd century AD. I don't think it's canon. I think it's just a myth that they came up with. It's like it's like a version of a comic strip story where you just like you don't like it, or like when never mind. I was going to say when they had one of the characters wake up and a whole season on TV was just a dream. It's like that basically. They're like, I don't think that this is real. It's just like somebody's idea. But basically, they said that Zeus was defeated by Typhon, and Typhon had removed all the sinews of his body and had hung him up the way Inanna had been hung up by Ereshkigal in the Canaanite myth. But this was Zeus, and he'd had his tendons removed, and Typhon was mocking him and tormenting him. And Hermes sneaks in with his invisibility and restores and heals Zeus's sinews. And then together they're able to defeat Typhon and bury him under Mount Etna. So Hermes is the sneaky god. He's the sneaky warrior who comes in. Oh, and in the Trojan War, the other thing where he has like a battle to fight, he decides he's going to be on the side of the Greeks and not on the side of the Trojans. And he goes down to fight. And the god that he gets assigned to fight against is Leda, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, and his dad's girlfriend, right? And he's like, he takes one look at her, he's like, it never does well for somebody to fight with dad's women. So I'll tell you what, I'm not going to fight you. When you go back up to Olympus, just tell everybody you kicked my ass. I'm not going to argue. And then he leaves, and that's like his whole thing there. So it's all about deceit, cunning, and just being kind of tricky and having a good time, and always looking out for himself. That's the essence of Mercury. And what we can take from that as magicians is that our basic interface with life is always about trying to get ahead. We're always going to be a little shitty to everybody else, and we're always going to try to get what we want for ourselves. We're always going to try to manipulate our communications in ways that make us get what we want. And if we're aware about that, about ourselves, that's basically what this mercurial thing is going to try to do within us all the time, we're able to mitigate that and use it in ways that are more beneficial to ourselves and others, right? And that's basically what we're trying to do, is have a good time for ourselves and others in ways that aren't harmful to other people. And one of the main reasons I recommend doing the right thing and being better and always trying to have a better life for yourself is because it's more pleasant. It's more, the experiences you get when you try to be decent are more enjoyable than the ones you get when you're trying to screw people over. So when you try to mitigate this impulse that we have in this mercurial part of ourselves to misrepresent things in our favor, when we fight against that, we're actually building a better life for ourselves. And I'm not saying don't ever sell things, because I mean, we're supposed to sell things. We're supposed to try to get as much as we can for ourselves. And that's part of the game of life. And it's on purpose, and it's good, and it's healthy. It's a healthy competition. If you look at Hermes is also the god of the games, and that's the competition between humans. And that competition between humans is what we do. And it's good, and it's healthy, and it's how we keep ourselves on our toes. Everybody's excited about generative AI, but it's not gonna last, because it's not new. It's not keeping us on our toes. It's just regurgitating what we already learned. What humans do is we bargain and we barter, and we always try to get ahead for ourselves. And that competition drives our growth. And that's what gets perverted into capitalism. But it's a very real part of existence, that like people, when you have somebody in your life that is giving you crap or challenging you or testing you or holding you to a higher standard, you are going to continue to improve and increase your abilities and get stronger. If you work out regularly and you have a partner that you work out with who's like always like asking you what you're lifting this week, like how long are you going to keep lifting that, when are you going to add another 5 pounds, are you still getting sore from that? They're always asking you if you're ready to progress. they're going to drive you to progress, you know, and they're not going to let you just sit there and be comfortable where you're at. If you've agreed with them that you want to grow, and we want to grow as a species. That's why we have a hermetic part to ourselves. We want to continue to grow. We want to expand and be better and gain things. And so I that's why I don't think that we have to worry about the whole AI, generative AI thing taking over for people, because it's boring after a while, because it's not new. You know, I'm generating all these images with AI, and there's a theme, and they all kind of look the same after I've made a couple hundred of them, and I'm just, it's boring. It's not interesting. I want to see my friends create for me, but I can't afford their prices. So AI is cheaper. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be what it is. The warrior aspect of Hermes is important to remember, that we're always going to be challenging ourselves and others through our communications, so that we can continue to grow and become more ourselves. I want to touch on how he was the lover of Aphrodite. He was part of having the phallus of Zagreus, or whatever, you know, that being the ichthyophalic god, having a big, large phallus, being the generative force in the universe. It means that you're going to have a lot of babies in the mythos, apparently. So one of his loves was Aphrodite, and the story is that after he'd been in court for a while, he fell in love with Aphrodite. So he was born. He goes out, he steals these cows, he makes the lyre, he has this experience with Apollo. Apollo becomes his friend and really digs the guitar he made, gives him these cows, and introduces him at the court, and the court receives him, and Hermes is taken in, and he becomes the messenger of Zeus, and Zeus is working with him, and they are all integrated, and they're all finding their jobs and everything, and Hermes meets Aphrodite, and of course he falls in love with her, because she's the goddess of love. She's beautiful. He lusts after her. He wants her, and he hits her up, and she's like, "Oh no, thanks. I appreciate it, but I'm not interested. Have a nice day." And so he gets depressed, and Zeus feels sorry for him. So Zeus sends his eagle to steal Aphrodite's slipper, and take the slipper to Hermopolis, where Hermes is, and drops the slipper at his temple in Hermopolis. And she's looking all over, because apparently this is a very important slipper. And if you look at all the clothing of Aphrodite, her garments are very important. And it's in all of her myths, like the number of veils that she removes and different aspects of different myths are important. And the armor that she's given has a specific representation, and I don't remember all these things off the top of my head, or I would totally list them for you, but it's important to remember that all of her clothing mattered to her. So when her sandal disappeared, she had to have it back. So she finally tracks it down to Hermes's temple, and he gives it to her, and she's like, thanks. And because they have this interaction over the sandal, they actually hit it off, and they become lovers. And one thing leads to another. She's there talking about the sandal. He gives it to her. He's like, "Hey, you want a drink?" She's like, "Sure, why not?" So they have a drink, and they get to talking, and she finds out she loves him. He's witty, he's charming. They get together, they hit it off, they fool around, they have a baby. They have Hermaphrodite, right? So Hermaphrodite is the child of Hermes and Aphrodite. Another time, so like he doesn't just forget that he loves her either, right? So like they have Hermaphrodite, and Hermaphrodite he's a youth and everything, and he's falls, or some nymph falls in love with him, or he falls in love with a nymph, or something happens, and he goes down and he drinks out of this fountain, and the nymph becomes part of him, and then they become half man and half woman, half male and half female. And that's why the hermaphrodite is of both natures of male and female. And so he calls out to his mother and his father, and he says, as I was converted to half man by this spring, so let everybody else be converted to half man going forward. So anybody who drank from that spring basically lost their manhood. It was the theory. And it became more effeminate, right? And that was to explain how hermaphrodites existed, and why the whole gender fluidity. We like to think that the whole trans thing and the gender fluidity and the pronouns and all this stuff is a modern manifestation, but the Greeks were dealing with it too. They had Hermaphrodite as a myth, because this idea of the fluidity of gender, and it's part of our human makeup. It's always has been, and it always will be. It's not new that we're dealing with it, and it's always been controversial. It's the trickster god, who is the thief, the god of thieves and liars, is the one that ends up also being the god of trans people who shift from one gender to another. It's not that's not a coincidence that this always ends up being considered degenerative, or of Hermes, or of a trickster mean, because it's not if somebody looks or presents feminine and actually identifies as masculine, it feels like a miscommunication, right? So that's part of the gods of deceit. It's under his purview. So that's sort of I guess it's kind of interesting. I mean, my son is trans, and it's interesting to me to see how that has manifested across time. And it's not new. It's certainly not new, and there's nothing wrong with it. But anyway, so he falls in love with Aphrodite, and they have Hermaphrodite, and later, like after, like they just went their separate ways. It was a one-time hookup or whatever. When Aphrodite gets when Hephaestus traps Aphrodite and Ares when they're having an affair, and he captures them in this golden chain. And while they're all chained up in this golden chain in the midst of their throes of passion, he calls all the other gods to expose them and reveal that he was being cheated on. And so Ares, all the gods come and they're laughing at him. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this." And they're just jerks about it. Everybody knows that they had the Ares and Aphrodite were a thing before Hephaestus came along. But anyway, there's this whole ugly scene, right? And Ares is like, he looks over at Hermes and he says, "Hermes, messenger, giver of blessing, son of Zeus, would you be content to be chained as fast if then you could lie abed with golden Aphrodite?" He's like, "Wouldn't you like to be chained up there?" And then Hermes is like, "Oh Lord Apollon of darting arrows, would that it might be so. Though desperate chains and thrice that number were to enclose me round, though all you gods were to have full sight of me, and all the goddesses too, I would even then choose to lie with golden Aphrodite." He loved her so much that even while she was embarrassed and the other gods were making fun of her, he stepped in and he's like, "Yeah, I would be chained to her too. Give me that opportunity. Chain me up. I don't care if they laugh at me. You're worth it." And so said Hermes, and laughter rose among the immortal gods. So that's an example of how wit can redeem a terrible situation, and you can use humor to save people who have embarrassed themselves through their actions, or have been revealed to be something that is, or if people are being mocked in public for something that's none of your business, you can actually turn it around and save them the indignities by using your wit and your sense of humor. And that's sort of what he did there. I thought that was cool. So he is the god of many things. The epithets on theoi.com, definitely check them out. There's a bunch. I'm not going to go over all of them, but these are just this next section is sort of a high level whirlwind overview of the things that Hermes does. And we're going to go over it so that you see how diverse he was in his manifestations, but at the same time that there's the same theme in all of his material, and all the gods, and all the ways that all the things that he's considered the god of, they have something in common. And it usually has to do with flow or shepherding, or the contest, the revelation of the true essence of a thing through contests, through comparison, and through bashing things together until you figure out what makes them the same, what makes them different. It's all part of this categorization and sorting aspect of Hermes that he has. So we'll just jump on in here. So he's a god of animal husbandry, and he's the shepherd, the flock tender, and the cattle thief, right? So he's all of those things. He's the god of heralds and messengers, right? He's the messenger of the god, but he's also the god that protects all the heralds. The messengers of ancient Greece all carried a version of the messenger rod, which was a caduceus, and it was this big brass stick that they used to make people fall asleep if they gave them any crap. And it was basically just a big bronze stick. It's a club, and they would use it to defend themselves. But also it gave them a level of protection, because in theory, the messengers were protected. So yes, he was a god of heralds and messengers. He was the god of trade and merchants. So if you think about this, so like the shepherds are growing the sheep and herding the sheep and moving the sheep, right? And the messengers are the ones delivering the messages, and they are it's with the information that gets delivered by the messengers that you're able to do trade, right? So if he's the god of trade and merchants, you cannot have trade without without knowledge and information that comes from messengers. So if you look at what merchandising is, and what if you the different towns that were in Greece at the time, to be able to make a profit in business, you had to have something that was worth money here, that was worth like $5 here, that was worth $20 over in Athens, and it cost less for you to drive it over there than you would lose on the profit when you sold it there. That's how it works. That's how making money in commerce works. You take something that's worth less here and you sell it somewhere else for more profit, and you make more money than it costs you to take it over there. Basic business, right? All of this relies on knowing things. You have to know what the price of wheat is in Athens to know whether or not it's worth driving it all the way there. You have to know how long it takes to get there. You have to know whether your food's going to spoil on the way. You have to know whether or not the roads are safe. You have to know if you have to pay off the bandits to get your stuff there, if that's going to be cost you more than it's worth to do it. To make a profit, to be a profitable business person, you have to have information. This information has to flow back and forth between your city and that city through the messengers, right? So as we expand on what he does and his roles here, you can see that they build on each other. So like the god of thieves and trickery, as soon as you have the god of trade, you also have the god of thieves, right? So within trade, there's always an element of theft, right? Because if my peppers are worth $5 here and it costs me $1 to take it to Athens, those peppers should only cost you $6. That would be fair, right? Except I'm going to charge you $12. That's not fair. But I have to pay for myself to get back, and I have to buy new peppers, and I want to have a little bit left over. So that's how I justify it. But that's not fair. It's not one-to-one. I'm not getting exactly what I put into it. I'm getting more than that, because it's communication for my benefit, right? That's what Hermes is all about. And that's trickery, and that's sort of, in a way, it's theft, right? All property is theft in a way. If I own it, then you can't have it. It's that aspect of reality that where we're always like in conflict a little bit. It's that's all part of this whole Hermetic thing. And that's why Hermes ends up, Mercury, the sphere of Mercury ends up on this pillar of severity, because yeah, exactly, stealer shoes. And stealing shoes, actually, it's important. The shoe disappearing and then reappearing to consummate a relationship. You see that in Cinderella and other stories too. Very, very important. This shoes. Foot fetishists have been around for 10,000 years. Yeah, so let's see. He's the god of language and wiles, right? So lying and deceit. He's the god of communication and expressing things through our throat. But he's also the god of lies, right? So anything that can be said that's true can also be lied about, and he's the god of that. He's a god of roads and hospitality. For there to be travel and commerce and the communication of information between cities, they have to be protected on those roads. Thieves are the ones that are going to steal from you on those roads. He's the god of thieves. He can protect you as the god of thieves from thieves. He's also the god of not being thieved from. So therefore you'd make offerings to him when you go on the road. So he's the god of the roads, who's going to protect you while you're on the road, and of hospitality, because while you're out and about, it was all these myths of the punishments of people who didn't take care of strangers on the road, end up insulting the gods. Those are the myths that drove people to be hospitable to strangers, and that hospitality to strangers is the essence of trade and of merchanting. If you just kill every stranger that shows up because they're a threat to you, you're never going to be able to buy their peppers that they brought you all the way over in Sparta, and it's through hospitality that we can have business and commerce and trade and civilization, and we can begin to exchange information and gather data and build libraries and museums where we store the things that the muses have inspired us, and we pass it on to our people who come after us. It's through these rites of hospitality that we can build our civilization, that we can build our trade and share our resources and get our communications out to everybody. He's also the god of feasts and banquets, right? So after you've been prosperous for a while, you start to have feasts. You have leftovers, and out of your harvest leftovers, the money that you made for those peppers that you took to Athens, and you got to make a little bit extra. You buy some stuff for the gods, and you make your offerings to them. Hermes is the messenger to the gods. He takes those offerings to the gods. That's what he does. He's the god of feasts of banquets. He carried those offerings. When he was considered the one that took the bones, like Zeus got tricked out of the bones, out of the juiciest pieces of meat by Prometheus, and humans got to have the meat and Zeus got to have the bones because he was tricked. So anyway, it's Hermes that takes the bones up to Zeus when we make the offering, or the essence of the bones, and that's how Zeus knows that we're actually doing things. So he's that messenger that carries our prayers up, the angelos, the angelos, the messenger, the daemon of Zeus. So that's how our prayers are taken up. So our requests to Zeus are carried up through the heavens by Hermes. All right, moving on. God of many things continued. So he's the protector of the home because he's the god of thieves. Again, in the same way that he protects you from thieves on the road, he protects your home and your property from thievery. He's the god of guard dogs because they prevent theft and they're the protector of property, right? It's building on that again. He's the guide of the dead. He uses his staff to wake them and move them down. Like I said, he's the shepherd of the souls to the realm of the dead. He's the god of sleep because of that staff that he has that allows people to fall asleep. And he got that staff because he was on a mission from God. And he's on this mission from God, and he's walking down this path, and there's these snakes fighting in front of him, and he puts his staff on them, and when he touches them with it, they fall asleep. And that represents the power of his ability to put people to sleep. And then he makes the caduceus because he figures if it worked on the snakes, it's going to work on people too. And that's how he gains the power to put people to sleep and wake them up. So that staff makes him the god of sleep. He's also the god of dreams, the dreams of omen, and the birds of omens, right? He's the god of omens because he's heaven's herald. And heaven is the source of these birds that fly through the air that get interpreted to tell people what's going on. It's the dreams come from him as well. He's I don't remember the name of the nymph that he slept with, but he created the messengers of the dreams. Oneiros is his child too, I believe, the god of dreams. Let's see. Rustic divination. He's the god of rustic divination, which is basically any poor person's method of casting the shells or the bones or the stones or anything to figure out what's going on from fate. And he had to connive his way into getting even this level of divination because Apollo didn't want him to have it. And he ended up trading the panpipes that he created as a shepherd. Apollo loved the music that he was able to make with these panpipes. And so he traded the panpipes that he made to Apollo for the ability to tell the future because Apollo was a god of divination and whatnot. So Apollo agreed to give him a skill in divination, but because he was the shepherd god, it had to be something that was rustic and it wasn't very poetic or anything. So he's the god of divination by stones. And if you're into things like geomancy, that's divination by stones, and that's why it's a hermetic art. So let's see. Rustic divination, gymnasiums and games, the test of human against human. So he's the god of the games. If you go into the gyms and the Parthenon so So in ancient Greece, once they figured out that they had a city state, and that they had these people that would tend the crops and there would be plenty of food for everybody, they had a lot of leisure time on their hands. And so they developed philosophy, and they developed the games, the Olympics. They developed this debate system of philosophers versus rhetoricians, so the sophists, the people who manipulated language to their ends. They invented the Senate, they invented democracy, they invented the forum where you could actually have conversations because they had all this leisure time on their hands. The uh, uh, in their leisure time, they would compete with one another, and they would channel their energies for war. Instead of like starting trouble in the city, they channeled those energies into the gymnasium. And Hermes was the god of the gym, and it's his method of growth by communication is referenced here in the conflict between humans, right? So in the wrestling match, it's person against person, muscle against muscle, and you're contending to determine who's the strongest, and you're just measuring yourself up against one another. And once again, it's measuring, it's sorting, it's identifying who is the stronger, it's classifying, it's putting people into their place and having a spot. But it's also recognizing that it's a growth process. The gymnasium is where you go to expand your skills and to be better at wrestling and to change your ranking and to grow as a person and to challenge yourself, right? So it's that whole test and competition and wit against wit for the purpose of growth and for the purpose of bettering yourself and getting more and getting gains, right? So, you go to the gym to get gains, and you go to the god of the games to get gains. Yeah. So we already talked about the rustic music because he invented the lyre and the panpipe, stuff that shepherds would do. Animal fables. I think I already told you the story of Aesop, who asked for the gift of wisdom and received the fable. He's the god of fables, and he's also the god of magic. In Greek myths, he's not the god of magic. He's the god of language, and Metis is the god of magic. But the magic of Greece was pharmakeia, which was ecstasies, right? Ecstasies and poisons and drugs. If you read what Circe did to Jason and the Argonauts, she poisoned them and sent them up into the heavens. That poisoning is what the art of the witch was. That's what pharmakeia was. And in the New Testament, when it says something about witches in the New Testament, it uses the word pharmakeia, and it's basically the drug dealers of their time that would curse people and poison people and hex people through their herb knowledge. So that was Metis. That wasn't Hermes. Hermes was more on the side of he was more about the medicinal properties of the herbs, if anything. But he's associated with Thoth, and Thoth is the Egyptian god of magic. So a lot of the magical side of Hermes comes from this association with Thoth. But as I said earlier, the whole language thing and the Hermetic magic thing is all based on that Corpus Hermetica myth of the divine Pymander, that story of basically Neoplatonism as expressed through Pymander. So, but anyway, he's the god of magic, right? So he's the god of magic as through that Hermetic thing for all the reasons that I said, but also because he's associated with Thoth. And Thoth is the god who wrote everything down, and it's again he's the god of writing and communication and the informing of things in symbol and the expressing of it through words. And also he's if you look in the Herms, according to Plato, at least one guy went around and inscribed all the Herms with these platitudes and telling people what the right thing to do is, because Hermes was the guide to human beings and what they should do. So this city philosopher took all of his wisdom and stuff that he gathered from all these other people, and he claimed it was his own writings, and he would go around on all these Herms and inscribe them with these poetry things and these little factuals that would encourage these rustics to be better people and to behave in certain ways and to deny their impious ways and to embrace their highest potentials, right? And it was just basically being encouraging and encouraging people to be better, and Plato tells the story because he's basically saying this guy's a jerk, and what is gain really all about, and what do they gain from this? But the idea of him being the moral guide is suggested through that story, or referenced in that story. So in addition to Aphrodite, he's also he had several other loves. Brimo, one of the epithets of Hecate, lost her virginity to Hermes on the banks of the Thessalian lake Boibis. I don't think they had any children, but Deira is another epithet of Hecate, and she and Hermes had Eleusis, of the Eleusinian rites fame. He was married to Pytho, the goddess of persuasion, and he's the goddess of speech, and she's the goddess of persuasion. It makes sense. And also Persephone. He tried to woo her and failed. So those are all the people that we know that were goddesses that he fell in love with. In the workbook, I go into a little bit more detail about the nymphs. Actually, I don't think I included them. Here, let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Hermes loves. Here we go. And yeah. So he loved all these nymphs. I'm not gonna be able to share it with you, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He had 8 different nymphs that he had relationships with, and children with, and she bore they bore him deities like Pan, Agrias, the Panes. Penelope was the one that he had the Panes with, or the god Pan and his entourage. He also had lots of mortal lovers, not just the nymphs and the goddesses. He had I want to say like maybe 15 or 20 women, or myths of mortal women that he had sex with and fathered children with, and all these different places. And men, he was known to have homosexual relationships with Amphion, Crocus, and Perseus, of all people, the guy that destroyed the Gorgon. The reason Hermes helped him is because he was his lover. So he's the god of fluidity of sexual preferences. He's very omnisexual when it comes to that. But that's just it. Hermes loves the interaction and the flow of communication and information. It's not about the form that it takes. It's just about the interaction and the experience. That's how it sort of works, in my opinion. Okay. So the qualities of the planet. So trying to put all of that information together to be useful for magicians, so that we can understand how to work with the magic, or how to apply the forces of Hermes when we do our magic. Distilling all that stuff into something. These are some of the ideas that I walk away from with the idea of what the qualities of the planet are. So Mercury is in charge of breathing, breath, lungs, mouth, and voice. So all those things that have to do with expressing your will into being. All things of communication, vocalization, and eloquence fall under Hermes as a result, because he governs the throat and the voice and the mouth, and that projection of things and symbols. With eloquence comes persuasiveness. When you have a good vocabulary, you can express things in a way that make people want to do what you say. You develop that persuasiveness, and you can use it for business dealings, which leads to commerce and trade, which leads to accounting houses and sales, and basically all the things that we have around trade and merchandising, and all the things of economy are all related to this planet. It's the god of deceit and changeability, because he is very much about mutability. When you look at the medieval stuff, when we get into the stuff from Agrippa and the 3 books of occult philosophy, the metals that represent him are always like brass, red brass that has different types of metals mingled together. Today we use pewter. It's a mixture of metals that reflects that mixed nature of Mercury, where things are mixed together, and the actual form is created out of the multiple parts. That mixture is also reflected in the mixture of genders, Hermaphrodite, his child, and the fact that he's the lovers of men and women. He's the god of the ambiguously by God. And he's also the god of the 8th sphere, Hode, intellectualism, the sorting of things, and that spreadsheet, rows, columns, and organization of information. So you take all that together when you start to look at how you're going to work with him as a magician, and you can sort of see how those qualities are going to manifest in the magics that we do. It's all about communication. Communication is the key to understanding the powers of this sphere. When we do our conjurations, if you always think about you're working in the mode of how can I get information more clearly between myself and my unmanifest world and the material world, or vice versa, you're always going to be more successful if you structure your rites around the concept of clear communications. It's the qualities of the struggle. The struggle is real is a very mercurial statement, and that comparison of things for classification purposes. The struggle reveals the differences, the strengths, the weaknesses, so that we know who gets to go in what bucket in our sorting and in our understanding of their potential, so that when we go to make a decision, we know that we're going to talk to Jim because Jim's really good at making coffee if we want coffee, but we're going to go talk to Tom because Tom's really good at making tea if we want tea. And depending on what we want, we're going to have a sorted, classified system of who we're going to go to and talk to based on their qualities. Because comparing Tom and Jim's coffee and tea, we know that one is better than the other at these things. So that's what that conflict and that comparison is all about. It's about getting the right resources that you want to accomplish your will. It's about the establishment of relationship maps, the tables of correspondence that we create when we go through Agrippa and all this stuff. It's a map of correspondences. It's a map of connections of where this idea is connected to this idea and how they relate, like what the strengths are, weaknesses are, or if they're related at all. How they are expressions of the same thing or how they're different. That's what the sphere of Mercury is all about there. Oops. It's the flow of information, commerce, and the exchange of money and ideas in symbol sets. And of course, Hermetic magic. So that's sort of trying to summarize what Hermes is not easy. Can't tell. But when you go to actually use the magic, once you kind of understand and grasp those concepts, when we start applying the magic to things, using the techniques of like the 16th century grimoires and the pentacles, what you end up doing is you get you use it to create movement where there's stasis, like when things are constipated and they need motion. When things have gotten what's the word? Indolence has set in, and there's a lot of inertia and things haven't moved in a while. Conjuring Hermes is going to get things to flow again, right? It's going to bring new information in that changes the dynamic. It's going to create a new situation because information has changed. Basically, it's always about information changing in some way to create movement. And this goes back to the 8s in the tarot deck. If you look at the sphere of Hode, where Mercury is assigned, that's the numbers 8s in the Thoth deck always are about fluidity or movement or swiftness or quickness or speed. It's that yeah, I'm sorry, it's that information that causes action. The Alatori are a set of spirits that we'll talk about here in a little bit that you can conjure using one of the pentacles of Mercury, and they are there to assist diplomats and students, people who are trying to learn languages or put together information and build these data tables of correspondences. They rely on these aleatori to tell them things, and spies and diplomats who need to have information so that they can make negotiations in their favor. They work with these aleatori people. So it's information that causes action and change according to your will. Another aspect of him is Hermes Chthonios, and Hermes Chthonios is the black man of the crossroads. Andromalius is Hermes Chthonios, in my opinion. It's very much that god of the crossroads that you go to and you make deals with to get what you want. And you ask him for information, and you give him information, and you want things, and you exchange things at the crossroads at the right times and under the right conditions for your own benefit. And that's what you go to. And you go there for travel purposes because he's about travel. You go there for protection. You go there for information. You go there for blessings in your business. You go there for all the things that get you ahead in slick ways. And it's clandestine. It's sneaky. It's tricky. It's in the realm of thieves. It's done at night. It's done at the crossroads where things are considered dark. And when we say the black man at the crossroads, it's not because it's like an African American or whatever. That's what Midjourney comes up with, but it's actually physically it's the basis of Nyarlathotep, and it's not racial is what I'm trying to say. It represents that the dark side of things, the chthonic underworld side of things. So let's see, we have stupid good luck. I'll talk about that in a minute. Leadership to guide others, translations and communications with other spirits, business, substitutes. Okay. So like, yeah, so you use this magic to make things go in your favor. You have a lot of good luck when you work with Hermes. Hermes is represented by the rabbit, and the whole lucky rabbit's foot is representative of tapping into that mercurial energy for your own good luck. I'm actually going to be putting together some talismans for good luck, and I've purchased rabbit sweet for that purpose. So yes, one of these days I'm going to get that put together and actually sell those. Let's see. So you get all kinds of good luck when you work with them. Leadership to guide others. The Hermes Agator, using that epithet of Agator, will help him be more I'm sorry, a better leader. I started reading comments, and of course I got distracted. Sorry about that. So yeah, you can work with them to grow in your leadership skills and to help guide others, because he is the guide. He's good with translations and communications with other spirits. Like if you're having a hard time understanding what a specific spirit is. So like I've done several experiments with different grimoires where I just decide I'm going to go into the Thurgia Goetia and conjure all the spirits I can and interview them and see what they're like, and then write about it. And I did that with the Lemegeton's Goetia, and I did it with, anyway, this new system of spirits. Sometimes when you go into a new system, you have a hard time understanding the spirits because they talk in an accent. They got a funny way of doing things, and you're not used to it. You need to learn more about them, and you can conjure Hermes to explain to you or to establish better communications with these spirits. That's one of the talismans, one of the pentacles that we'll talk about. That's one of the effects that it does. In business, there's in the Greek magical papyri, there's the asopstrukos spell that you can do. It's you basically make a symbol of Hermes that is a baboon-faced Hermes with a backpack with a symbol of Hermes on it. And here I have one that Alison Tchaikovsky made. And you put it on a box, and in the box you put the spell of asopstrukos, and I've got the spell in here. And it's and you put the name of God in it that has a certain number of letters, and you basically you put the name of your business in there, and you ask this the spirit of Hermes and Zeus, or I'm sorry, Hermes, to come and bless your business and to keep your business flowing. Whoops. Yeah, so that's the asopstrukos spell, and that's in the Greek magical papyri. And that's if you take the conjuration class, I have that detailed there in the conjuration class. miracles. That's the sphere of unnatural unnatural acts. That's where you go to get things that are go against the natural order. When you need a very quick manifestation from the unmanifest to the manifest in your favor, you go to Hermes for that. Obstacle opening. Yep, Joey, you said do you have a conjuration for Hermes Chthonios and maybe a road opening ritual, or be able to point us to where we could find a good one? I do. Actually, I have there's a whole pinnacle that I use. It's a very simple technique. It's not like a hoodoo rite where you have like all the stuff that you do, or it's not complicated. It's very easy and it's very effective, but it's just drawing a talisman and carrying it around with you. But yes, he's very much about opening the ways. And Joey, you said, what was the other name I said for him? And I don't know exactly. There's quite a few, but in the workbook there are lots of epithets for him. And the thing that I wrote, I have a prayer that I wrote that I included in there that I think is, in my opinion, is fabulous. But it's I think very useful. Trying to find the list of epithets on the website here so I can see if I can jog my memory here a little bit and maybe know which one you're referring to. So the names that I've mentioned so far: Epimelius, the keeper of flocks, and let's see, the Enagonius. Enagonius is of the games, the god of the games. Hermeneutes is the interpreter or translator. Tricephalus is one of his names as the god of the crossroads. He shares that name with Hecate, the three-headed of road intersections. He is known as, let's see, Argophantes, the slayer of Argos. One of I think I mentioned the myth where Zeus had him go and kill the guy that was guarding the bull Io so he could get to that. Maiados Huios is the son of Maya. That's the god. I think that might be the one I mentioned. That's Hermes Chthonios was the black man at the cross. Oh, Andromalius. Haha, you're talking about Andromalius. Andromalius is a demon of the Lemegetons Goetia. And Andromalius is he's got all the same hallmarks of Hermes Chthonios. He's appears at the crossroads. He shows up at certain times. There's a whole grimoire devoted to Andromalius that explains all the different things that he can do in addition to what's described in the Lemegeton's version of Andromalius. But when you look at Bune, the other another duke in the Goetia, his attributes are to bring wealth to a person, to bring eloquence to a person, and to expose to put candles on the sepulchers of the dead. So basically to reveal where dead people are located. And if you look at what Hermes Chthonios does, it's all that. It's bring you money. It's the psychopomp to the dead spirits and eloquence. That's all Hermes. So I think Hermes Chthonios is also represented in Bune as well. So yes, so Andromalius and Bune are different ways of looking at the same, in my opinion, energy that is represented by Hermes Chthonios, and that's just sort of the shadow side of Hermes Celestius, or whatever you want to call him, the Angelos, the more above ground version of Hermes. You can also use Hermes for home protection. This was something they all did. They all had a little Herm in their house. I have one here, but a lot of people had a little Hermes in their house that they would use to keep their house safe. And basically they would say, you're the god of thieves, keep your thieves out of my house. Here's some offerings. Let's see, the communications, clarifications with people who just don't understand. If you're ever having a hard time getting your thoughts across to people, or people are playing dumb, and that happens quite a bit at my job because they don't want to do their job, so they pretend like they don't know how to do things so that I have to do it instead. And this is a really great application of using that communication things for your own gain. And I mentioned to my boss, for example, that, and this isn't very occulty, but I mentioned to my boss that somebody was having a hard time with things, and she communicated with their boss, and their boss asked them if they needed more training. And it was quite pleasing to me that worked that way. But that's basically what Hermes can do for you, is he can put you in touch with the right person to put get that information behind the scenes to the entities that are being obstinate and difficult to you. So in the same way that we talked about how he was a opener of the ways, he opens ways by forcing things to happen through communication. All right, so here, let's go ahead and hop into these pentacles. I am not happy with this slide, but it's sort of all right. It's not what I really wanted, but it's kind of okay. So there's only 5 spirits. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why do I only have four bullets? But there's only 5. Oh, I know why. Okay, so there's only 5 pentacles of Mercury. So as we go through these planets and the Key of Solomon, you'll see that with each planet there's fewer and fewer pentacles, and I think it's just because I don't know why, honestly. It doesn't make any sense to me, but we're down to 5 pentacles for the talismans, but there aren't that many ways that they used Mercury. And I think that when you look at what each of these talismans do, you can understand that basically all of the aspects that we've talked about in these other in all these myths and all these other slides so far, you can get to them through these through these 4 or 5 talismans. So the reason there's only 4 bullets here is because the first talisman I'll talk about is, I think it's the 3rd talisman of Mercury, and it's this one that has the 4 spirit names on it: Kokaviel. I can't remember what all they are, but the four spirits of that talisman are sort of like the workers, the elemental spirits that represent the sphere of Mercury on the earth, in my opinion. So they're the ones that are like the grunt. They do the grunt work for the gods and for the archangels, and manifest all the mercurial things in our lives for us. So I didn't bother to put a bullet point for him. But this one right here with the 5-pointed star on it, this is the symbol that causes spirits to appear for you. So when they say that he's the Lord of the spirits of the messengers, the God of heralds and messengers, he's the God of all the spirits in between heaven and earth as well. So he can cause the aerial spirits to appear before you. He causes miracles contrary to nature. That would be let's see, I think it's this one with the plus sign on it. You know what, let me double check. I can just look it up. I have it open here somewhere. But yeah, I get them confused. But it's one of these is for opening doors, and I think it's this one because it looks like a road, and that's how I try to remember it. But then I always think I'm a little confused. So I believe that the one that looks like a road is the one that's actually for opening doors and making you be able to move around the world from one place to another very quickly. And the other one is for causing miracles contrary to nature. And this one over here with the big dodecahedron star on it, the 12-pointed star, that one is for the aleatory, which is designed for diplomats and students, and it helps you to know all things. So these are the ways that these 16th century magicians would take all that stuff that I just talked about and put it into practice. It was to conjure spirits of communication and to force your manifestation of things and your blessings of your business, your property, and your communications and your knowledge and your information, so that you can trade and get ahead of everybody else. You would just send the spirits out to get you the information, be like, bring me that information, protect my property, make my merchants, my people be delivered on time without getting robbed, open all the pathways and remove all obstacles between my deliveries getting there on time and it not manifesting. And if there's anything terrible that happens, use that miracle cure one to unnaturally save our people. So that's how they would use all these talismans to actually access all the different aspects of Hermes that we've talked about so far. When you actually do the magic, the way it manifests for me is the leadership to guide others, right? So like having the information that you need to be a effective leader, to be able to guide people and be the boss that your team needs, or be the guide that will get the group through the forests. All that stuff that you need, that energy comes from having the right information, having the right understanding of that information, and putting all the pieces in the right place and understanding how they relate to one another. And all that stuff comes out of your map, your relationship map that you've built
using the powers of Hermes and Mercury. So that ability to lead comes almost second nature. It's almost a passive additional talent that you get as you work on yourself and go through these initiations and go through the materialization of that initiation. Translations and communications with other spirits. So I have literally asked the Alatori to explain to me the Dervani manuscript so that I could put it into context, and I ended up having a whole vision of all this stuff, and the vision came as a result of about 20 different PDFs that I found that wormed their way to me out of nowhere, that explained all this stuff, and I got this glut of information that my brain was able to process, and it turned it into this huge psychic immersive, beautiful spiritual transformational experience where I just was able to, tap into the all thing all at once. And that was because I worked with the Alatori to understand it better. So this whole idea of, like, if you're having a problem with your spiritual work, or if you're trying to understand something that you can't quite get clear, conjuring these spirits of Mercury to get clear communications and to translate the thing you're having a hard time with is a quick way to get a solution for that. You also get stupid good luck, like incredibly wonderful things, benefits just go your way in no time. Yeah, the rabbit is actually the symbol of Hermes. That's his symbol. One of his animals, one of his mini animals. But yeah, I generated like a dozen different animals trying to get that to look good, and he's definitely the best looking one. And my mouse is apparently not going to work here in a minute. This is I will be patient. I will not lose my temper. There we go. Okay. So stupid good luck. I'm not having stupid good luck today. I have not made any offerings to Hermes the way I should have in the last little bit, but this is what happens when you don't keep up on your magics. So yeah, so he's good at those things. Crap, it's stuck again. Unstick this. Sorry, I can't actually move my presentation forward right now because of this. Is why I actually have to take a break and fix this silly thing. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's the camera is why. I apologize for this. This is embarrassing. I think my batteries are actually dying. Let's see. Ah, there we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so stupid good luck and miracles. Anyway, clear communications are also the things that we can get out of this. Yeah. So what was the question that we were talking about there? So Francois asked, can we use this pinnacle talisman and for other conjurations along with the one we want to conjure? Yes, definitely. So you use this one that has the 4 spirits. I actually draw it on the back of the ones that I've got these other things on, because I expect these 4 to do what the statement of intent is for each of these other ones. So for the for the Alatori, for diplomats and students, and to know all things, this side of it represents what the focus of the powers of Mercury are going to do, and the other side of it, the Kokaviel side with the 4 spirits on it, represents the forces that will make sure that that happens. So I always put that one with the four spirits on it on the back of all my Hermes or my Mercury talismans, because they're the ones that drive it to be more effective. Yes. So there we go. All right. So that's the practical side of things, the materialization side of things. So when you actually go into the devotional side of things, when you do the initiations, again, I'm going to recommend just the Orphic Hymn and the Conjuration of the Archangel as a way to get introduced to this sphere of communication and whatnot, Mercury. But the uh, yeah, the whole point of this phase of your initiation is to sort of understand where it is that your map of relationships where let me start over here. When you go through the devotional path of things and you start doing the initiations into the sphere, you're going to find where your communications grid, your database has misinformation in it. You're going to have all of your bad communication skills revealed, and the things that are keeping you from succeeding in life are going to be blatantly obvious to you, because you won't be able to communicate or materialize anything as you're working through these blockages. They make themselves pretty painfully obvious. But the nice thing about this particular sphere is that it is the sphere of communication, and if you just listen and spend some time scrying on these things, they will definitely come through for you. Can't recommend that enough. But when you start doing it, you're going to find that you have, because he's the god of information and the aerial spirits work with him, you find that you just know things. There's a strengthened intuition that you have when you're subconsciously aware of everything that's going on. Your brain just generates the correct answer for situations. People think I'm witty. I don't seem witty in these classes, I'm sure, but I've had people tell me that I'm witty previously in my life. But it's not that I'm witty. It's just things just pop into my mind and I say them. It's not, and I guess that's wit. But the reason they're popping into my mind is because I've studied and made all these connections in the back of my head. And when I hear something over here, it reminds me of something over there, and I just say that thing, and it sounds, and it's quickly connected, and I've got this map already made in my brain, and I'm able to spew it out and make the punchline quicker than other people, so I seem like I'm funny or whatever. But it's just this sense of knowing. You just kind of are aware of that information because your map has been filled out and cleaned up and validated and corrected, and you're connecting to the information that you need, right? And that's the thing about these initiations. They plug you into this energy, this source of that planetary power in your life, and then it's just sort of like always on in the background, and you have it there ready for you to tap into. And if you don't use it, like you can see with me today, I haven't used my Mercury stuff lately. You don't enunciate as well. You don't have as much eloquence and the je ne sais quoi, the ability to speak well and whatnot. But you don't lose anything. Like, all I would have to do just light a candle, and in no time I'd be back to my regular self. You can't go backwards with this stuff. You can get rusty, but you don't have to ever start over again. So definitely, I definitely recommend doing the Hermes initiations as soon as possible for everybody. And the thing is as you clean yourself out with that sphere, you're going to just basically stop lying. You stop lying to yourself, and you stop lying to other people, and you stop presenting misinformation or believing misinformation when it comes. Oh, that's another thing. It's that you just sort of know. You just sort of know when people are lying. Your truth radar gets really, really good, and you can tell when people are just sort of full of it. You start to feel more empathic about things, but it's really just knowing that when this happens, when ABC, therefore DEF, and putting all that information and just having it sort of processed in the background and readily available for you is the passive result of this ritual. Types of devotional magic: regular offerings and prayers. Specifically, that prayer that I included in the right. Let me pull it up here. The Hermes Agator thing. Saying that on a Wednesday, it's on page what page is it? 16. It's the epithets of Hermes section. The prayer itself is something that I wrote. I'm pretty happy with, but I went through theoi.com and I just went down the list of epithets and wrote a prayer based on what the definitions of his epithets were. And I did this about 2 or 3 years ago, and I started saying this prayer once a week on Wednesdays. I would light a candle and I would say the prayer, Hermes Agator, we call on you, O ancient leader among the gods, who guides and teaches and shows the way. Hermes Epimelius, keeper of the flocks, Dias Heteras, companion of the feast, Epilus, sheep-tending shepherd, mingle now the realms of the mortal and divine. Bear offerings to the Olympic throne and return to us, Angelos, angel of the gods. Hermes Anagonius, god of the games, bring us favor in our contest, train us in mind, body, and soul, in right action and informed intent. Maiados Julius, son of Maya, teach us the mystery of ecstasy. Caridotes, grant us joy. O Ariones, bring us luck and be ever ready to lend your aid. Hermes Catesios, protector of property, stand in the preservation and the growth of our wealth and prosperity. Hermes Tricephalus, three-headed, who waits at the intersection. Athanatus Diactorus, immortal guide. Hermes Propylaeus, god of the gateway. Katabates Hermes, who conducts the shades into Hades. Hear us and bring us wit and luck and joy in all our endeavors. Guide us to the proper path. Bless all our works of wonder and lead us in the way. Right. So I would say that every Wednesday morning at dawn and like light this candle. And what it does is it draws down every aspect of Hermes that I've talked about here in this I mean, basically I base this whole thing around this prayer because it's incredibly powerful for all this stuff. So when you say all these things like in this prayer, it taps into every aspect of Hermes, and it's a nice little Swiss Army pocket knife of a ritual to get in touch with them. But if you're doing underworld work, you've got Katabates Hermes, you've got Hermes Propylaeus, the god of the gateway. That's that god of the crossroads again. Athanatos Diactorus, immortal guide. He's the immortal guide is the one that takes souls to where they belong. If you're having problems with hauntings and spirits, and not everybody deals with ghosts, not everybody believes in them, but people who do have to deal with them, they believe in them. And Hermes Propylaeus and Athanatus Diactorus are the ones that you go to take them on their way and get rid of them. Very, very powerful spirits to work with. But when you say this prayer once a week, I wouldn't do it. I mean, just do it a couple of weeks and see how you feel. But if you do that over time, you're going to find yourself plugging into all these different forces in a quick and easy way. So I recommend that for your devotional magic. I found it to be incredibly helpful. Personal anecdotes and advice. So the aleatory, the aleatory are great. I had I actually when I first made my aleatory pentacle, I thought I was hallucinating because I heard these winds talking to me, and I was shocked. I was sitting in my office and I made this talisman and I called on these spirits and I said, reveal to me something I don't know, just to test them. And all of a sudden I put two and two together about my ex-partner. And I was like, oh, and something that I had never considered about my relationship with that person turned out to be true, and I was like, oh, so like the revelation of indiscretions is something that you can learn from this kind of thing. It's incredibly accurate. I asked for some information about a piece of work code that wasn't working, and they were able to provide me with it. It's almost like they were like the Chat GPT of the 3rd century. The aleatory are incredibly good at just getting you information through the intuitions. Crossroad rites, I have worked with Hermes, Katabates Hermes, quite a bit. Chthonius is an amazing deity to work with. You can, if you wanted to, you could use your relationship with Hermes Chthonios to establish an entire system of working with all of the entities of the underworld, because he has communications with all of them. He can function in the same way that Skirlin does in the true grimoire. He can put you in contact with all of the underworld entities that you might ever need to work with, and introduce you in a way that makes them want to help you and work with you. In terms of business, like I showed you my uh, uh, asapstruco. I'm never gonna be able to say it right. The box that I have that has the spell in it from the Greek magical papyri. I recommend that to everybody. I mean, basically, you set it up and it just generates. It's constantly generating. Uh, it's almost like having a sales engine putting your name out there for you and making sure that you're in everybody's awareness. Yes, Joseph, they definitely would work for exorcisms. I have worked with Katabates Hermes in an exorcism before, and it was very effective. It got rid of all the hauntings, and it helped the person get to the acceptance phase of their grief, in my opinion, quite a bit faster. So yes, it can get rid of little nasties, if you're familiar with that term. It's like the astral psychic vampires that you pick up. It's great at getting rid of those things too. Any kind of spirits of the dead, any spirits of the undead, psychic vampires, people who are in the flesh, who just every time you're around them you feel drained. You can conjure Katabates Hermes before you interact with them, and just ask them to be with you, and they won't drain you quite as bad. It's quite interesting to see how people squirm when you come to the party already invoking the gods. It's fascinating. And of course, travel. I work with before I learned. So these days I work more with Ganesha, because I like chanting. It's fun. But before I learned about chanting, I used the road opener thing literally to open roads whenever I was stuck in traffic, and I never once had a problem with it. It's like the most miraculous talisman when you're stuck in traffic, and you just like pick it up and you're like, Hermes, make a way, and within 5 minutes you're like out of a stuck thing, and it happens almost all the time. So uh, Francois, this can be used for the conjuring of other spirits other than those of Mercury. Yes, you can use it to compel other spirits besides those of Mercury to appear, but they need to be like aerial spirits. So the aerial spirits are basically all the ones that are under anything that's under the heavens. So all the spirits of the Lemegeton or the other grimoires. But yes, it's also very good at eloquence. If you're having a hard time finding the right way to say things to people, you can conjure these spirits. So in the material world, the qualities of that are ruled by the planet Mercury. If you were running into these things in the material world, if you need things in the material world to add to your spells, that's what this is for, is for generating your spell kits and your materia, so that when you put together a ritual, you're including the elements of Mercury, so that it increases the vibe, and the tincture of the sphere is concentrated on Hermes and his stuff. So within this world, water is the element that's related to Hermes and Mercury. And if you look at the metal mercury, it makes sense because it's the liquid at room temperature. Quicksilver is the metal of Mercury, but also tin and silver marcasite, according to Agrippa, but brass, according to Bombastus, Paracelsus. Any kind of mixed metal works for them for that. Amongst stones, the beryl, the chrysolite, and the emerald, sapphire, green jaspers, carnelian, and agates. All the agates are under Mercury. And if you look at them, they're all like the mingled mixtures of colors, and they're all very mercurial when you see them. But a lot of these, like jasper and chrysolite, and emerald, they're like for all the planets. It's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, they're all the gods like emeralds, and all the gods like jaspers, it seems. So Mercury rules the occult properties of stones. Let's see. Oh, there's more stones that it rules: the red marble, topaz, and those stones that have a color mixed with yellow and green. In terms of herbs, the hazel tree, the five-leafed grass, cinquefoil. This is something that hoodoo workers use quite a bit is the cinquefoil, the five-fingered grass, for good luck and for gambling. Let's see. Pimpernel, marjoram, parsley, and such as have shorter and less leaves, being compounded of mixed natures and diverse colors. So anything that's mixed and mingled, cilantro has that sort of like mingled flavor. You know, it's anything that mingles well with other stuff is going to be under Mercury. Let's see, seeds and bark are ruled by Mercury. So like the pieces and parts that generate new life, seeds. Bark is also the covering and the outer shell of things, and it sort of keeps everything together and protects the tree, but also keeps the sap on the inside. So sort of the cohesiveness of the tree and the boundary of that. I would think that bark would be more Saturn. I don't know why it's Mercury, but it is. The symbol of Mercury is the human. That's the animal that's associated with the sphere. It's not like a lion or a like the lion was Leo. It's, or for the sun, it's the man for Hermes. The animals are also of quick sense, ingenious, strong, and constant. So anything that's mercurial itself, like inconsistent and changes its mind a lot, that's going to be an animal. Or skittish, those are going to be animals that are associated with it. But anything that's fast, like the rabbits, and anything that is very procreative, like rabbits, are also going to be associated with him. Amongst birds, those which are naturally witty, melodious, and inconstant. So crows. Crows aren't very melodious, but they're definitely ingenious, strong, swift, that kind of thing. Let's see. Amongst fish, I'm not really sure about the fish. I don't know why the fish are all that important, to be honest. But the places that you're going to find that are ruled by Mercury are shops, schools, the gym, and the exchange, like any banks or any place where money is exchanged, like the stock market, is all ruled by Mercury. All colors that are white or 10 colored are his. Fair, curious, green, ruddy, betwixt saffron and purple, and resemble Mercury, and the moon. So if you look at the sources of Mercury in nature include what's it called? I can't remember what it's called. It's a Orient. A lot of stuff is made out of it from the Orient, from overseas and the East, and it's got a ton of mercury in it, and it's basically mercury sulfate. Anyway, it's a red stone, and it appears red. And there's a whole process in the great work that's based on creating red paint, vermilion paint, out of mercury bearing stones that are red to start with. So anyway, the red stones have to do with Mercury. The red lead. I'm going to remember what it is in a little bit, and I'll tell you what it is. All right. So Joey says, I have a Mercury altar and just ordered a Hermes statue. Would you work with the Hermes Chthonios at the same altar or a different aspect? I've got a room dedicated to angel work with altars for the 7 archangels, and a small room downstairs with an ancestor altar and holy dead. So not sure where to do it. What would I recommend? So the 7 archangels, if you're working mostly with the archangels, keep them in the same place. And I would put Hermes down on the altar with the ancestors if you want to have a chthonic thing, a chthonic experience with him, and then let him just be your chthonic Hermes and work with him there with the dead, and that would be perfect for it. I'd keep him in the basement. And then if you have another Hermes, like I've got a, so this is my chthonic Hermes, the Herm here, but I have another statue of Hermes wearing the helmet with his little staff, and that one I keep down in the temple that's actually with all the gods. So he represents the sort of the celestial aspects. So yeah, you can just set it that way and have different altars for different aspects of it if you want. All right. So for incense, for Mercury, he likes mastic, frankincense, cloves, cinquefoil, and you can mix it with the stone of the agates. I'm not going to put stones in an incense. I don't see the point of that. And brain of a fox and a weasel, because foxes are smart and weasels are slick, and the blood of a magpie, because magpies are of I'm not going to do any of that stuff either to make an incense. I don't think that burning brains of fox would actually smell very good personally. So personally, what I use for incense for Mercury is cinnamon, or frankincense or nagchampa or pretty much anything, because he's sort of sneaky and tricky, and he likes to get stuff from other people. So I also give him gin because the juniper is sacred to Zeus, and by giving him the offering that would go to Zeus, he seems to like that. And gin is also very much a mercurial alcohol. If you've ever gotten faced on gin, you definitely have had a mercurial experience. So phrases for your statement of intent, you can call on him as the son of Jupiter, the crier of the gods, the interpreter of the gods, basically any of his epithets. I'm not going to go through all of them because we're already at going on 2 hours here. So the hymns, there's a separate hymn. Like the first hymn in here is the hymn, the Orphic hymn to celestial Hermes, and then the second hymn in here is the Orphic hymn to the Chthonian Hermes. And neither one of those hymns are the prayer that I wrote, which is completely not any of those things. So those three prayers that we presented in this class are great ways to do devotional magic. If you conjure the archangel and read through those prayers, you're going to have a very sweet and very deep and very swift and very cleansing experience with Hermes. And it's low enough that it doesn't really cause a lot of problems. It just kind of clears everything up. I don't know why, but I don't think I've ever had a negative experience when it comes to getting an initiation in Hermes, or in Mercury. But at the same time, my Mercury is in Gemini. So, I mean, it makes sense that it would already be kind of at home in my chart. So maybe, take a little bit of caution, but for the most part, it's just about understanding and knowledge. And I've never been afraid of learning things, and even dangerous things about myself that I didn't know before. I'd rather know them than not know them. Like I repressed some memories that when I found out about them were traumatic, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I'd rather know I was traumatized than wonder why I wake up sweating and can't remember my dreams. I'd rather know what's going on with myself. Yep. So I picked this picture because this is the Hermes Chthonios, the lord of the underworld, and I thought those were pretty gruesome looking spirits of the underworld. But yeah, I plugged in the words from the hymn to generate that. It's lovely. The spirits were ceremonialists. So the god of the sphere of Hod, or the sphere of Mercury, or Kokab, is Elohim Sabaoth. The choir is the archangels. So like in the moon, it's the angels, but in Mercury, it's the archangels. And the archangel Raphael is the intelligence that is assigned to that sphere. The terrestrial spirits from that talisman are Kokaviel, Gadoria, Savania, and Hokmahiel. And the seal of the terrestrial spirits is it's actually in the workbook. I didn't put it in the presentation. Sorry about that. I meant to, but I forgot. But it was on that other slide. So it's this one up here with Kokaviel on it. All right. So those are the names of the gods if you want to conjure them to. Whoops. That's not what I meant to do. There we go. All right, so the images of the astrological talismans. Let's see. So the first one is to confer knowledge, eloquence, diligence, and merchandising and gain, and to beget peace and concord, and to cure fevers. So this talisman that they created is for everything that Hermes does, but also to cure fevers, because it's also for health and healing. But this was a picture of a young man, bearded, having in his left hand a rod in which a serpent is twined about, in his right hand carrying a dart, having his feet winged. So it's basically just an outline of Hermes is the image that they would use to conjure him. But this other image of him was a man sitting on a chair or riding on a peacock, which is what this guy is doing, with eagle's feet, and on his head was a crest, and his left hand was holding a cock or a fire. Didn't quite generate it exactly the way I had imagined it, but I thought it was kind of nice to have a dude on a peacock. Yeah, so those are ways that you can actually tap into that for whatever purposes you might have. All right, so that's all I have for the class, for the presentation. There's more information in the workbook, I think, this week than there was previously. but that's because there's just a lot more information about Hermes and Agrippa and in the myths. So it's sort of a, it is what it is kind of moment. All right, there we go. Okay, so does anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask? Oh, you lost the screen share. I'm sorry. Oh, I think I turned it off as well. But does anybody have any other questions? Let's see. What's your go-to version of the Orphic hymns? For me, I just say my own prayer. To be honest, it covers both the celestial and the Orphic entities in the ways that I prefer to work with. But it's just based on whether I want something above or below is what I would use to guide me previously before I had that to work with. Let's see. Who is the best correspondence in the Egyptian pantheon? Thoth, Set, Anubis. To me, it's Thoth. It's definitely Thoth. When you look at the story of Typhon, when Hermes went down to hide from Typhon with all the other gods in Egypt, he became the ibis, and that represents the god that he was affiliated with, and that was Thoth. So pretty easy. Let's see. Joey says, I find the rhyming messy and some of them feel stupid reading them. Yes, I too felt very stupid reading them, but I just kind of disconnected my pride from that and wandered through. But there are, if you want other translations, I've worked with Patrick Dunn's translations of the Orphic hymns are great. Sarah Mastros has some translations. Hers are also very rhymey-wimey. And I don't necessarily agree with her choices of translations, but I mean it's a version, and the people who work with them are they find it to be very effective. She's a very good magician in my opinion. A lot of people don't agree with me, but I don't really care. I think she's really cool about what she does. She understands what we're doing, and she does it really well, I think. But yeah, so there are multiple versions. Patrick Dunn's version, he's a poet. He's a PhD English major and studied all this literature, and he's been studying Greek for 40 years. And he actually followed internal Greek rhyming rules. So he wrote it in the same way that they wrote them in Greek in the old days, but in English. So they sound weird and they don't rhyme at the end. And you might find those more along the ways of what you want. But it's very incredibly powerful. I think it resonates pretty well. But these days I just use the Taylor ones because I basically almost have them memorized because I've said them so many times, and it's just easy. Yeah, but yeah, who's AA? I don't know who AA is, but anyway, that's all I got, you guys. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you all have a great evening. If you have any other questions, do feel free to ping me in Messenger. I have a ton of work that I'm doing for my day job lately, so if I'm late getting back to people in correspondence, that's why. I apologize, but I will get back to you if I owe you messages. And sorry that I haven't been there as much as I was previously. But that's all I got. Thank you very much, you guys.